Alright guys, welcome to the next video in our HTML series. Today we're going to be talking about block and inline elements and what they are, like what that means, okay? So I got this example pulled up on W3 Schools, and basically what block level elements are. This is really simple, guys. If it's a block level element, it means that it's going to stack on top of each other in a web page. Anything you put on in one block element, if you put another content in another block element below it, it'll stack on top of each other just like this here. See, stack, stack. A paragraph and a div are block level elements, so when you put them on a page, they'll stack. The content will stack on top of each other. And then there's inline elements, okay? And inline elements do exactly what they do. They remain in a line or in line with each other. Think of it like that. They're always going to be in a line, which means they're going to be next to each other, okay? So there are, we're not going to learn all of them. As you can see, like there's a list of inline elements here. It's a lot. And then there's a pretty big list of block level elements here. You don't have to remember any of this. We just have to know that there's inline and block elements. And just know that if you make one element and then another one below it and it goes side by side, just in your head be like, oh, that's an inline element. And if you want to make it block, you can use CSS for that. Or you can wrap it in a block element like a div to make it a block element. So if that sounds confusing, don't worry. I'm going to jump into the code right now, and we'll do some inline and block elements. We'll do the most common ones, and I'll show you how they work like in a practical situation. So I'm going to go to my HTML course code here, and I'm going to create a new file. This is lesson 12. So I'm going to say 12-inline block .html. Okay, and I'm gonna hit Command B on my Mac keyboard, or hit Control B on PC if you're in VS Code to get rid of that line, or you can just, if you want to get rid of these, you can also just click and drag over. I'm gonna get my boilerplate code by hitting Shift, exclamation, and Tab, and I'll name the document HTML inline and block elements. I'll save. Alright, and then we can go ahead and we'll launch the page here. So I'll hit go live with, I'm using the live server extension with Visual Studio Code. And there's our page, there's our title. So let's start out with, we'll do block level elements first. So I'll make a HTML comment by hitting Command and question mark, or you can do the same thing on PC by hitting Control question mark. And I'll say block level elements. And then I'll put in quotes, or not quotes, but parentheses, stack on top of each other. Okay, you can copy what I'm doing here if hopefully you're following along in your own code editor, but just make little notes for yourself. And then the most common block elements that stack on top of each other that you're going to use, by far the most common one, period, is going to be a div. So divs are just like, they stands for divider, and it's kind of like an element that you make as a container for stuff, just to put stuff in so that it stacks block, or so that you can use it with CSS to make it do what you want, like go side by side. So I'll put one div, and I'll say, I'll just label it as div, or I'll just put div in there. And then let's make another div, and we'll just put div. And then what I'll do here is I'm going to add a little bit of CSS to these just so you can see what I'm talking about with inline and block elements. So I'm going to go up to the head of my document and put a style tag. And I'm going to say, I might just say everything on the page, which is the asterisk. Select all stuff on the page and give everything a border. One pixel solid and black. And now everything has a border, including the body. Well, that's pretty cool. And then we can actually do text align center, so that my text will be centered. And now you can see what I mean when I say block elements. They stack on top of each other. So even without the border, you can't see it quite as clearly, but just know that like these divs are stacked because they're block elements, okay? And then we even have an additional border here because that's the body of the HTML document. That's why that's there. So, but yeah, so those the most common one is a div, and then of course there's all the other block level elements here that are called semantic tags. So all the ones like in this list here that say like article, main, footer, header, stuff like that, they're all basically just divs, but over time the makers of HTML they got tired of seeing a whole web page with just divs everywhere. It was harder to read the code. So they made divs, but they made them with like different descriptive names so you could read the code better, if that makes sense, okay? So that's why there's like a header and a footer now and main and sections, because they don't want divs everywhere all over your code because it just looks sloppy and it's hard to tell like what code does what. Now there are still developers, and like there's thousands of videos on YouTube of people like building web pages for people and trying to do tutorials, and like they'll just make everything a div still. And you don't want to get into that. You want to be semantic and use the correct HTML tag when you're building a page so that it's descriptive, okay? Don't make everything a div. But anyway, the other common ones that you'll have other than div are like, if you're making like a real web page, you'd have a header like at the top. Like most websites have like head sections where they'll have like social media links or something. So I'll just say header. And there's our header. And then let's actually make this in order. So like first we'd have a header and then maybe some divs, right? And then maybe after our header and some divs, we would have a navigation bar. So I'll put nav and just put nav in here. There's our make-believe navigation area. And then next in our web page, we might have a main tag, because we might have like, actually, no, I'll show you how I usually do pages. When I'm making my pages, I start with like my header, I make my navigation, and then every like separate section of content that's like a section, I'll put in the HTML tag called section. So we might have another section, a section here, and I usually give it an ID attribute. So let's say first up we have like pricing. We're making like a landing page for pricing. So, and then in here we'll put pricing section. Oops, not in there. Sorry guys, I got a new keyboard and getting just hard to get used to. So let's say pricing. There's our pricing section, and then let's say under that section we'll make another section. And this section talks about features. And then we'll put features here. And then maybe there's a third section that is like testimonials. So I'll put another section with an ID of, I'll just put like reviews. I don't want to write out that big testimonials rude. So we'll say reviews. And then lastly on the page, we'll probably have like a footer with like the copyright information and stuff like that, and the contact address, stuff that's usually in the footer of our website. And as you can see, all these, again, they're divs, man. I mean, they're basically just divs, but over time they got semantic text added to them so that now we know what's going on. And then it helps even further if you like put IDs and stuff on your HTML areas, because then now it's really like obvious what this is. Now this is the pricing area, feature area, reviews area, and they're all different sections of the website. Everything isn't just a div. Okay, so those are block elements. Those are all like the most common ones. Of course, there's like paragraphs and headers. Those are all block elements. Again, if you have an element and it goes inline next to something and you want it to be block, you can just put that element in a div, or you can use CSS, and we learned CSS, and you can just hit you can put a property on it called display block and turn it into a block element, no problem. But anyway, so let's do inline elements now. I'll say inline elements in my comment. And some common inline elements. The most common one you're going to be using a lot is going to be an anchor tag or a link. And we have a whole video on that if you don't know what those are. So I'll just say link 1. And now I'm going to copy below here and we'll make like 2 more links. And we'll see how these behave. Well, as you can see, I already saved the page, but they go side by side because why? Because they are inline elements, guys. That's why they stay in line. So we got links there. And then we can even wrap these in a div if we wanted to. And then put them in their own little box. Now again, if I wanted to make, let's say I want to make this particular link a block element, I can just add a style attribute and hit display block. And now it's got its own line. Simple as that. Okay. So if you have an inline element that you don't want to be inline, it's as simple as that to fix it. Or you could even wrap it in its own div because a div is a block element, right? So watch this. You can also do it this way if you don't want to do CSS. Bam. Works the same way because now it's in a div, so it has to be stacked. The other most common one are probably, what else are we going to be using a fair amount of time? Oh, buttons for sure. So button is the semantic tag to make a clickable button. So let's just say button 1. And then below it we'll say button 2. And those are inline. So yeah, you'll be making those block a lot because usually you'll have like a web page with a header, some kind of background image, and then like some kind of button that says like learn more or something. And you always have to pretty much, when you're making a real web page, you always be displaying those block or putting them in a div, whatever one you want to do. I do both, honestly. Sometimes I make a div to make it block. Sometimes I hit display block. It just depends on, do you want to write a little more HTML or do you want to write more CSS? It's up to you. Another popular one that you'll be using is span. So what a span is it's kind of like it allows you to put certain elements in here or content, and I use them if I just want to style like one piece of content with CSS. So here's an example of that. I recently built a design where I had like an H1 and it had text like what was it? It was like the best product in years. It was some kind of generic text like that. But then within the design, I think the word best was like a different color than the rest of the text. So I wrapped it in a span because it's inline, so you can just put it like right in the middle of a sentence and it's not going to affect the sentence. So I'm going to put it in a span. But spans do, the only thing about spans is they do, like spacing does affect spans. So if I do this, now it's right there. But see, since we gave everything a border up top here, the span is showing with lines, but normally it wouldn't. It's just showing you like that's the span, but that won't be there normally. So I can just say, I can actually get rid of that here. Say display border none. There we go. So now that's more like realistic because you're not going to see that. And then let's say I just want to make the best color red. So since it's wrapped in a span, I can style the span and it will affect the styling of the word best. So let's say I want the color to be red. Now just best is red. So that's the practical application of why you use spans. Couple more ones that are inline are images. So images will always go side by side with each other. Let's grab a couple images here. Let's say soccer. And I'm just going to click on this image here and copy the image address. Put this here. And then I will also click on this one and copy the image address. Make an image right next to it. And let's see what we have here. They're like super big. Sorry about that. So they're so big that they're stacking. Let's go ahead and change the width of it. just for, say, width 300 pixels, or 300, say width 300, width 300. All right, see if that fixed them here. There we go. See, now they're inline because they're inline by default. Again, can use CSS or wrap them in a div to make them stack. The last ones that you'll be using a lot are going to be inputs when you're making forms. And we just had a whole video on forms. If you want to know more about forms, you can find that in this playlist. But so let's say you have a form. So the form itself is block, the form tag. So the form itself will be on a new line, but when you have like an input type text, there's a text input here. It's kind of hard to see with all these borders, but there's a text input there. And then you'll have another input type, say password. Now they're side by side. See? But yeah, guys, so that's basically that's the basics that you need to understand of inline and block elements. It's not a big deal if something is inline. If you don't want it to be, again, just you can use a little bit of CSS to change that, or just wrap it in a div if you don't want to use CSS. And of course, I'll have a whole other course on CSS that gets in depth so that you know more about how to use CSS properly. But for now, just for HTML, that's all you have to really know about inline and block elements. Okay? Thank you for watching.